Are you in the habit of being perfectionistic or maybe just really critical of yourself when you mess up? You want to do things well, which is great. And you find yourself kind of trapped in this cycle where you beat yourself up when you're catching yourself not doing it great. Okay, well, you are in great company because I would say most Americans are like this, not just women in midlife, just like most of us have been socially conditioned for sure to do this. However, there's actually another component to this that loops us into this self-loathing, self-critical thinking, beating ourselves up that is in our biology. Did you know that? And it makes it particularly difficult for us to get out of this habit. So if you want to learn how to break the habit of being mean to you, keep listening.
I know your deep, dark secret. You don't like your life. You're a woman in midlife, and for the past 2 decades or more, you've poured yourself in to other people. You've poured yourself into your career, your family, and yet on the inside, you feel broken. And that's no way to be. I'm Dr. Natalie Marr. I'm a clinical psychologist and a life transition expert. It wasn't too long ago that I was in your shoes, waking up in my early 40s, thinking I've got 2 failed marriages, and I'm a single mom for the second time in my life. And I just knew that I could do better, that I could feel better. Fortunately for you, I have about 20 years experience clinically. And so I've created a method that will help you learn to love your story. I know that the story that you're telling yourself about your life feels awful. And I know that you think that you can't change that. I assure you, you can. And when we work together, I'm going to help you to craft a different story, a story that you love, a story that makes you want to get up every single day.
Welcome back, everybody. Okay, so I get to talk to you today. I get to sit down with my cup of ambition and have a little convo with you, which I am really looking forward to. I hope that you caught my last podcast. Amy, one of my former group coaching participants, did the midlife mastery evaluation process with me and demonstrated for all of you, it's pretty harmless. It's actually really fun. You'll learn quite a bit of stuff, and I give you so much to work with. Now, Amy is ahead of us. You know, she did my group coaching program, so she's a little ahead of us. And as far as getting into this centered life thriving concept, really choosing the life we want to be living in instead of just living the life that we're not feeling comfortable with, but we don't hate. We're not in a midlife crisis yet, but we really are kind of in that midlife unraveling and realizing some of this stuff ain't working for us. You know, this is not my thing. Some of this stuff is not working for us. This is not working. So we are looking for the things that we need to do to find that centered life thriving, right? I hope you listened though, because you really can hear that even in somebody that's doing the work like Amy, there are always places to improve. And one of the topics that came up is one of probably the biggest barriers, one of the vulnerabilities most women have. So you heard me talk about the fact that we are not quite kind to ourselves, correct? Yeah. Here's a little clip as Amy and I were talking about it last week.
I know I need to be okay with asking for help when I need it. And I don't like to do it because then it lets other people know that you can't do everything by yourself.
Right. Right. So that sucks. And that goes back to, I call it a trauma response. And I think that little girls get taught this real directly when they're younger, that like, you should be able to do this on your own and that your worthiness is contingent on that. If you've had to ask for help to be a mom, to be a wife, to be a whatever you are in your life, you start to feel really self-conscious and like you're not mustering up in the world. That started long before the roles of our adult life, long before. So, you know, we can let go and have some compassion towards ourselves that our own common humanity as women is. We we didn't get here not being hyper independent, but hyper independence is a trauma response that the world taught us to be when it didn't know what to do with us or how to make us function, whatever. So that's a podcast I could talk for hours on that subject. So I won't go into it further here, but it's something that comes with all of us and is probably a place we all can be working on. And what was beautiful is to see, yeah, you did know that. You also had self-awareness of it. Later in the document, I asked that question more outright, and you answered that saying, yeah, absolutely. This is an area of growth I would like to see myself work through. So props. All right. So then we got to self-compassion, where, for somebody who's been through one of my programs, I was actually pretty happy to see I had seen some improvement. I didn't have you guys take questionnaires like this prior to my group coaching. I probably will from this point forward have something similar from my group coaching packages so that I can monitor kind of where were you in the beginning and at the end. But I can say that because I know you, that it's mildly low, but it's better than where I remember you being at. So you've definitely improved in your ability to be, to see your own common humanity, to be understanding and know that common humanity is a thing, but you're still struggling with some of those smaller things about showing yourself kindness and being your own champion and lifting yourself up. If somebody else needs it in your life, I bet you're Johnny on the spot. But when it's for you, you're still kind of in some of that past way of thinking and believing about yourself in a very self-critical manner. Does that fit for you, Amy? Does that sound right?
Oh, absolutely. That fits with my inner perfectionist, which goes hand in hand with the part of me that does not like to ask for help when I need it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't it funny? Together.
Isn't it funny how that happens? So these are like, they're kind of working with one another. Well, I'm glad to hear that you see it that way too, because I think in some of the highlights and then later in some of the suggestions I give you, I'm actually having you combine those two in how you're getting your needs met. So you'll see a little bit later kind of the method to my madness with that. Now, what I find to be so fascinating is it is such a universal concept, this idea that we ourselves are stuck. Really, that's what it is. We're just stuck in our own biology of looking at what's not working and staying focused toward that off happening in the future. We're in our threat response system. Now, most of us know this to be fight or flight, but there's actually 4 ways that we show up when our life feels threatened. One is to get angry, fighting. One is to get really scared or fearful, fleeing. And one is to freeze entirely. Have you ever been there where you're just feeling paralyzed and overwhelmed and unable to do another thing? Yeah. And the fourth, not as familiar or talked about, is fawning, which is to preventatively try and ward off any possibility you'll ever be here again. That the conflict is so horrible of ever doing something like this again that you will try and get out of it before it ever happens. You'll try to design a life where you're perfect and it won't ever happen. Does this sound familiar? Now, this shows up most frequently in relationships. I'm not going to talk about that aspect of it today. Actually, the way that I want to talk about it is a fawning response that I see happen for a lot of women. We've been programmed, and I did call this a trauma response in the episode with Amy on purpose. We've been programmed from a very young age to believe that any fault that we engage in is a critical mistake that shows that we're not worthy and that our job is to course correct that. Our worthiness itself is coming from our merit, our ability to do the thing that we're being asked to do and do it the best. But here's the thing, with 8 billion people in the world, are all of us going to do it the best? Right. Like that's not even a thing, people. Are we going to do it 8 billion different ways? Absolutely. But are we all going to do it the best? No. And so perfectionism is actually a trauma response that I think is a derivative of that fawning threat response. So our nervous system is interpreting that there's a threat in our environment. Our making a mistake is considered that threat. And our learning to be super uncomfortable with that over time has really been about our programming fond response to deal with that threat. So we take it another level. We not only know in the moment that we did something wrong and get hypercritical, we learn the behavior of hypercriticalness, the inner mean girl that you've heard me talk about before. We learn that skill set as a way of warding off any future mistakes as well. And we think that in beating ourselves up, that over time will prevent the possibility of any conflict from happening. Now, the other side of this fawn response is that we're doing this to prevent any kind of conflict down the road interpersonally with other people. We don't want to show up in mistake, not perfect. And so we're trying to course correct what we're doing wrong. We actually are taking on some of those fight responses because we've become really critical, really mean to ourselves, honestly. But all of this is taking place in our own polyvagal nervous system biology. And we don't have a lot of control over the fact that we're biologically wired to show up in this way. So here is where I teach some tricks in my courses under growth mindset. I want us to actually link the biology response to a new response. So I can't get rid of what is millions of years of DNA writing. I know that your body will physically think of it as a threat when we show up in mistake. We have kind of that internal discomfort, feeling shameful, feeling guilty, feeling dumb, and that's going to happen. But now I want you to use that as your body cue to shift into a new way of doing things.
Are you liking what you're hearing today in this podcast episode? Oh, I am so glad. I love being able to really touch people in a place where they need the help, right? So I have two requests of you. The first one, could you just think of one person in your life that also could hear this message? I bet you could. And what I'd ask you to do is when you're done listening today, why don't you just take the link and send it to that person, right? Let them have a chance to also gain from this the way that you are today. And then the second thing that I would request that you do is make sure that you're following me where you get your podcasts. Like, comment. I even on Spotify have questions each and every week. Use any of those outlets because it does help me help you. What I gather from that information is what you want to hear about. And then I make sure that these podcasts are relevant to what your needs are.
The new way of doing things is to try and become the most excellent version of you ever, which is a growth mindset. Perfectionism is a fixed mindset. It believes that underneath it, there is a right way and a not right way. And that perfectionism is when we arrive in that right way and stay there statically. There's no room to wiggle. There's no room to grow. There's no room to evolve or add new things. Perfectionism is a false belief that there's a place to arrive that's right. I think a more evolved way of being is to think about it as excellence. That if you want to be the best version of yourself every day, you can do that. And the growth mindset and to this is tomorrow you can be a better version. And the next day, a better version. And the next day, a better version. And on and on. So what I want you to try to link it over to is this idea that I can be responsible in today to be as excellent as I possibly can based on what I know and also learning at the same time so that I can be a better version the next day. This allows for mistake. This allows for learning. If in this moment, I am not doing it the right way, I'm learning and evolving towards a righter way to do things. And so my version today did it this way, course adjusted, and tomorrow did it this way. Tomorrow, I'm a little more excellent than I was today. And that's exactly what I want you to do. So this kind of growth mindset really needs those biological underpinnings, those feelings of discomfort, those inner mean girl parts of us to come out And they are the announcement that we're trying to go back into that survival mode. But survival mode is not thriving mode. Okay. Starting to get how all this weaves together. Survival mode means I'm just living to live another day. Thrival mode is I'm living to be a better version of myself in every moment as I keep evolving. So what I want you to do is hook the feeling of inner mean girl, shame, I did it wrong. I don't like this. I want you to hook that as the precipice to move into that thriving mindset. So instead of fawning and trying to prevent any conflict from ever happening again, because I'll just do it the right way and I won't do it not right ever again, what you're doing is I didn't do it as well as I'd like to do it today, but I did it the best that I could with what I had for today. And now I know something different. So tomorrow I'm going to do this differently. Do you see how that evolution happens? It's really quite unique. Now, if you've listened to me for any length of time, you know that this is an effortful process. So what do we do with all of these big perfectionism feelings? What do we do when our inner mean girl is so stinking loud? Well, you heard me talk with Amy this month about this. I wanted her to start to work on acts of self-kindness. I find this to be one of the most brilliant antidotes to the idea of self-critical thinking. And it's definitely not in the content. It's in the intent that we come out being self-kind. Kindness is an action. It's not a thing that you can touch and feel in the same way as, say, a piece of paper is. Kindness is an action word, and to be kind means that you're always thinking about the intention. Now, I had a podcast not too long ago where I talked about this idea of us loving ourselves. You can go back to that core, right? We can go back to really feeling at our center that our whole job in this world is to love the being that we were given, this soul, the one soul we were given control over completely. I'm going to come back to her. That's the version of me, that Natalie, that I need to take care of and do the things to make sure that she is best suited to do the work, the effortful work of changing from perfectionism over to excellence, driven towards excellence, the fixed mindset over to the growth mindset. So what I need to know is what she feels is kind. I've got to have a relationship with her. I have to know what it makes her, if you listened to Amy and I talk, Amy framed it as, what does today me need to do so tomorrow me feels like she got something that worked for her, that her life got more functional? What does today Amy need to do to serve tomorrow Amy in such a way that life gets a little easier? That's an act of kindness, right? So you're thinking to yourself, all right, I have, all of these things on my plate, all these irons in my fire. What do I know that today me has it within her capacity to handle, to do, to add on, that would make tomorrow me or later me feel like, oh, what a breath of fresh air. Now, I see stuff like this on the interwebs all the time. In fact, I just recently was reading an Instagram feed of somebody that I follow, and the way they were talking about this was around travel, that before they leave for travel, they're always really big on making sure the house is clean, that, they're going to come back into a house that is organized where things are supposed to be. And depending on the length of that trip, that there is some sort of meal ready prepared, like something in the freezer you can throw into the oven or something like that, or like in the fridge, like you just eat it, or items are there, right? But she wanted to make sure that when she got home from travel, that those two things were in place. My house looks neat. I don't feel like I'm walking into a to-do list, and I have a meal prepared for me for the appropriate time of day that I was supposed to get home, right? Now, of course, that's barring travel plans switching up and getting home late. But I really love this. This is a great example of today me taking care with an act of self-kindness, tomorrow me. And just looking at my situation and making sure the intention behind it is to make future me have just a little relief, just a little kindness, just a little something in their life that makes life feel like, oh, this is it. This is it. This is what I want. Now, does it arrive at perfection? No. But I think these acts of self-kindness really over time develop a trust with yourself, which I know sounds a little strange, but think about it. Like if you've got somebody in your life that's always kind of there for you, made sure that you had this, asked you about that, when you needed help, said yes. What happens over time is we build trust with them, right? And so these small acts of kindness really are a big generator of that trust. I want you to be giving yourself small acts of kindness because over time, what I see happening for you is that you will start to trust that that will happen. And that if it hasn't happened, there must be an exception for that, that the rule really is that you're usually very much invested in those self-kindness acts. And if you trust that, even if you waver in it, your body and your mind knows, yeah, but I got my back. I got this. Like the travel plans changed, the meal didn't work out, but guess what? I know I got my back, so I'll be okay. And the next time it'll be adjusted and we'll do a little better. You can see how these concepts now complement each other. That pursuit from fixed mindset to growth mindset, where you're perfectionistic to aspiring for excellence, and acting in a way that's kind to yourself in small little increments eventually builds this really unbelievable trust that you have your own back. And then you can be more flexible, more agile. And ultimately, both of these are helping with that agility, that mental and emotional agility to kind of flex through life, no matter what life decides to throw at us, right? So if there was something that you could pull from this really great example in the midlife valuation with Amy this month, it's that I want you to know, first of all, you're normal, that you are wired to be more focused on the negative. And so your inner mean girl, she's supposed to be there. But instead of hating her and pushing her away, let's just use her voice, loud as it is, as a cue to move into trying to act in a way that you're challenging yourself towards excellence instead of perfectionism. Perfectionism is fixed and unattainable. And it's part of that nefarious way that I think I've talked about this in an earlier podcast, but capitalism is always trying to breed not enoughness. I had a car once. Beautiful car, loved its color, loved every part of the inside of that car, except for one thing, cup holder. Every time I used that car, cup holder bothered me, which made me continue to want more and look for another car. This is the nefarious way that our society has programmed us, is that we're never enough. It's not enough. We're not going to get enough. And we keep pursuing happiness outside of ourselves. That isn't what I want for you. I want you to know you love you, you take care of you, and you're always here for you. And so breeding that with these small acts of self-kindness really helps us solidify and be able to do the effortful work of moving from that perfectionistic attitude, that mean girl attitude, into she's my cue to go here, where I am actually going to celebrate my failures. I'm going to celebrate my falling down because it's part of my learning, so that tomorrow I can be a better version of myself. And the next day I can be a better version of myself. So hopefully these two little tricks put in combination with what we've talked about as far as staying anchored in that idea of self-love are going to help you on your journey to learning to love your story and find that centered life thriving. I'm just so grateful that you are a loyal listener and that what I'm delivering here is something that you want to be listening to each and every week. There are just other ways that you can be working with me through learntoloveyourstory.com. And I want to make sure that you know what those are. Now, for starters, all of these are links that you would find in the notes for every single podcast. And if you found me in a post on learntoloveyourstory.com, all of these links are there as well. But there are 3 ways that you can work with me. The first, and the one that I really strongly recommend, is join my Facebook group, join my community. This is a place where we can all talk with one another about what you're hearing me put out on podcasts, write in my blogs, and you really get some support, some community around making change, working towards that centered life thriving that you want. The second thing is I have a whole set of courses online. all there, right there for you, that will teach you and walk you through with workbooks, with guided meditations. So if you haven't seen that, you should at least go over and browse. And then my last and my favorite way is to meet with you one-on-one. I do a free consultation for an entire hour. It's called a midlife valuation. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at the value of your midlife. We're going to compare that to the goals that you have for yourself. And we're going to help you come up with a plan where there's gaps there. And it's all free to you. So these are the 3 ways to get started working with me in another way if you're loving what you're hearing on the podcast. All right, so I'm adding a little addition here. It's the legal stuff. Just so you're aware, nothing in any of these podcasts constitutes actual psychotherapy. Yes, I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Minnesota, but everything here is just educational in nature and is a suggestion of things that you could be doing in your own life to learn how to love the life that you're in instead of waiting for a life that you're dreaming of to come towards you. So just remember, this is not therapy. And if ever you need any resources for mental health, look in my notes and I'll always have a little blurb at the bottom where you can click on a link and get those services for yourself.